There's a whole lot of new units in the Omens of Destruction DLC. Let's test a bunch of them out against each other and against existing units and see what they can do. Let's kick it off with some Khorne Skull Reapers. These are an anti-infantry, big weapon strength on these. We'll see how they do against some very sturdy Sargard. These are the shield type, so the more defensive unit. Taken a lot of damage so far though from that big charge. The Skull Reapers' defenses aren't too bad though, considering that they're mostly shirtless. They got a bit of armor and decent melee defense. And by the end of this one, they are going to get through the Sargard pretty comfortably, losing about half of their health just over, smashing a similarly priced unit very well. I then tried to kick it up a notch, giving them a unit that's more expensive than them and in a similar damage-dealing role. The Demonettes do have the armor piercing to get through the bit of armor that the Skull Reapers have, but the Reapers don't need armor piercing because the Demonettes haven't got any clothes on. But both are smashing each other pretty damn hard in this one. Whoa, probably shouldn't say that when there's a Slanesh unit on the field. And unfortunately for the Skull Reapers, although it's somewhat close, they are going to win one of the battles, but they are going to lose the other four. So not quite up there with Demonettes. I also wondered whether they're actually any better than the very similar unit in their same roster, the dual weapon Chaos Warriors. So who's the best Khorne boy? We'll find out here. These two are both very similar. The Chaos Warriors have got a little bit more armor, but not as much damage output. Skull Reapers do have the magical attacks as well, and it looks like the dual weapons are going to win it here. I imagine the Skull Reapers struggled to get through all the armor of the Chaos Warriors. So while they are strong and they have the magical attacks, which might be a reason to bring them, I can't really see any other reason why you'd bring them over the dual weapon Chaos Warriors. How about some Wrathmongers next, and how about we have them kill some elves? Blech. It's been nearly 2 minutes and we haven't killed a single elf, so let's get on it. Taking on the Homemasters of Sordith, knocking them flying all over the place. The fight itself, though, is pretty even so far. The Wrathmongers with some pretty crazy melee attack and weapon strength, got the armor piercing, and they're actually pretty even in the defenses. I thought the Homemasters had better defenses, but nope, 48 melee defense for both. And thank the Blood God, the Wrathmongers are going to put the elves in the bin. Lots of dead elves, fantastic. Let's give them a real test then. The Chosen of Nurgle, one of the strongest infantry units in the game, possibly the best in the game. They beat all the other types of Chosen, so let's see how this goes. They're looking pretty good so far, the Wrathmongers. They seem to be beating down the Chosen of Nurgle. But Nurgle units, of course, do excel at being tanky and staying alive longer than everyone else and outlasting them. And that is going to reign true here, as the Chosen of Nurgle are able to beat the Wrathmongers in most situations. Maybe they'll win one of these, maybe two. No, they don't. They lose them all. But they nearly get them, so a very strong unit by all means. I also tried them out against the new Black Orcs, who, while very strong and defensive themselves, don't really have the damage output to get through the Wrathmongers, so they did lose to them. But then I started to wonder, well, are they better than Exalted Bloodletters, though? Khorne's previously best melee infantry unit. So I did this little test, 2 units of Wrathmongers versus Black Orcs and 2 units of Exalted Bloodletters versus Black Orcs. Let's see who gets through them more effectively, because Exalted Bloodletters cost 300 less than Wrathmongers, 1200 to 1500. And the Bloodletters in this case absolutely mauled the Black Orcs and got them done pretty quick, while the Wrathmongers were still going. And this is the more expensive unit that's taken longer to do the same job, and lost more of its health in the process. The Bloodletters just below half their health, the Wrathmongers at about a quarter of their health. I also did the same thing versus Hammerers as well, who do have magic attacks, which is going to be advantageous against the Bloodletters, who have that physical resistance, so that's not going to help save them. But again, it was pretty much the same thing. Bloodletters were able to get the job done quicker than Wrathmongers. Only just in the case of one unit. You see this Wrathmonger unit beat them around the same time. And I also tried the same thing versus Haganeth Executioners, because I just really wanted to see some more elves die, if I'm honest. But the same result again, so it seems that Exalted Bloodletters, if you want an infantry killer, go with the Exalted Bloodletters. Wrathmongers, though, are going to be better against other stuff as well. Even though they're not anti-large, they could go after cavalry and monsters because their melee attack is so high. And we can test this theory against Golfag's Man-Eaters, the new top-tier infantry for the Ogres. They do have good infantry smashing power, but they do have things like Vanguard deployment, which you're paying for, which isn't coming into effect in this kind of testing. But it seems like the Wrathmongers are mostly on the floor all the time, being knocked over by the Ogres, but they're still getting their damage done. And they are going to win this fight only just. They do have a little bit of health left, so they could still do some stuff after fighting these. And just to test my theory that the Wrathmongers were going to be more useful against large than Bloodletters would be, I did put them against these Man-Eaters as well, and as predicted, they did lose to the Man-Eaters. So Bloodletters are going to be the best if you want pure infantry killing power for Khorne, but if you want something that's a little more versatile, can take on large stuff as well, Wrathmongers. I also did one test with the Regiment of Renowned Wrathmongers, the Bloodwake Berserkers. They have absolutely horrifying stats, so I put them against the toughest of the toughest, the Chosen of Nurgle. It's looking pretty even so far. These Wrathmongers, though, look very nasty. Their attacks look very weighty. Those hammer flails look like they absolutely bonk. And they are going to beat these Chosen of Nurgle great weapons with just under half their health left, which is a very, very impressive performance. And this might be the new strongest melee infantry in the goddamn game. Now at this point, if you're thinking, Zerk, these battles are far too exciting for me, can you slow it down a bit, make it a little bit more boring? I'm getting too excited. Well, let's see who's the tankiest of Iron Breakers and the new Black Orcs. These are two very high defenses but very low damage output units, and that normally means an incredibly long fight. Although Black Orcs do have the option of being a bit more damage dealing or a bit more defensive. Obviously, not using the blasting charges for the Iron Breakers here just to have a pure melee fight. They will most likely win if they do use those. But the Black Orc shields are a very nice sturdy new unit for the Greenskins, something they've been lacking for a long time. But I'm actually doing a 2-and-2 test here, so 2 of the units have no buff at all. They're not using the new immovable bulwark ability for the Black Orcs, while 2 units are. So these 2 over here are using it, and as you can see, no one's done any damage to anyone in about a minute of fighting. This is going to be worse than Iron Breakers versus Treekin. Over the other side, these 2 units don't have that buff, so they do have more melee attack, but not as much melee defense. And as a result, some damage has actually been done to somebody. After nearly 4 minutes of fighting, there's a little bit of damage done on the more defensive unit side, and after about 3 hours, the Black Orcs without immovable bulwark are about to lose. They've done about half health damage off the Iron Breakers, and the ones with immovable bulwark on are slowly starting to lose as well. And after about 3 months, they do eventually lose to the Iron Breakers. And oh, was it actually 12 minutes? Felt like longer. They got the Iron Breakers down to about a quarter health though, so not a bad performance. Not the best, most tanky unit in the game, but up there with them at least. Something the Greenskins have never had anything close to. Now for what you've all been waiting for, the reason you clicked on this video, a little knob-on-knob action. For this test, I decided to make use of the Bruiser, who imbues nearby friendly units with a charge defense and charge reflection, something that these Pigback riders don't have, and as an anti-large unit, they are probably going to get smashed without it. At least that's my theory, so we'll put 2 units without the buff from the Bruiser and 2 units with the buff from the Bruiser, and we'll see the difference in performance. We're going to have them charged in the face by good old Empire Knights. These are the ones with defenses, not really taking too much damage on that charge. So the charge defense protecting them there, and a little bit of damage back from the charge reflection. As for the knobs not using protection, okay. This is what happens when I put a Slanesh unit in a video. The Pigback Noblars without the protection from the Bruiser are taking considerably more damage, but as the fight wears on, they're still going to hang in there, and the unit with the protection does manage to beat the Empire Knights with a good little bit of health left. Which is pretty impressive, to be honest. I didn't expect them to win either of these fights, but here they are, still winning and still able to do a little bit more as they've got some health left. The units without the protection still going though, and they are going to beat their Empire Knights as well, which is even more impressive. Don't even need the charge defense to beat these. I also did the same kind of test against Stone Trolls as well, a much tougher and more dangerous unit, a more damage-dealing unit. And as expected, they weren't able to hold them off, and not terribly well. The ones without the protection got broken pretty quick. Didn't do a ton of damage either. The ones with the protection didn't fare much better. They did do a bit more damage before they ran away, but still a pretty solid anti-large unit given how cheap it is. Now for some Mangler squigs, who I wasn't really sure what to test them against because, well, what is the same as them? They don't really have anything they can match against, so all we can do is test them at their intended job, which is killing infantry. So we're going to send them into some exalted bloodletters who go absolutely flying everywhere. Some serious mass knockback power with these little fellas. So far they are doing a good bit of damage, but they are taking quite a lot in return. I'm not quite sure how any of these bloodletters are actually hitting any of these squigs. They're flying around so goddamn much. But the squigs seem to be getting it done, but also dying in the process. They do explode when they die, so a little bit of damage from that as well as making a mess. But just as it looks like the Mangler squigs are going to be losing this one, they're all beaten down. They don't have much health left. They are all on the brink of losing, but they've taken the bloodletters down to very little health left as well, so they've evenly matched the bloodletters for the most part. But then we see the bloodletters start disintegrating away. Can they hang on and actually beat the bloodletters? Technically, they've lost 1 or 2 there. They have managed to kill the bloodletters, but they've dived themselves. But these ones have survived, so there is 1 that actually managed to win. And 2 that managed to win, and maybe 3. Can they do it and actually win the whole fight and be better than exalted bloodletters? They've only gone and done it. So I guess Mangler squigs are the best unit in the game. I think that's fair to say. Just let them have it, alright? Just let them have it. Look how happy they are. Fair to say they are very good at killing infantry, but maybe not so good at surviving. Now for some monstrous infantry, how about the Blood Beasts of Khorne versus some infantry as well, as monstrous infantry generally is there for killing infantry. So let's see how they do against some Plague Bearers, very tanky unit but quite slow damage output. And these Blood Beasts don't have armor piercing damage like most monstrous infantry does, so they're going to want to target lighter things such as these Plague Bearers. Thought that would be a good target for them, but they lost. They lost to the Plague Bearers. They cost about 1,100, the Blood Beasts, so I thought they would do pretty reasonably, but they lost. They not even got them down to half health before they've lost, so that seemed a little weird to me, but maybe I've just underestimated Plague Bearers. So I thought, let's knock it down a peg, right? Let's go back to basics. Let's just give them Empire Swordsmen, right? The simplest of the most basic plain infantry. They only cost like 400 or something. You can beat these Blood Beasts, right? Right? Yeah, so 2 units of the Blood Beasts lost to the Empire Swordsmen. I'm not sure how that happens. It's a little bit of a weird one because the other 3 units that did manage to win mostly won with about half their health left, which still probably isn't a great performance given the price ratio. But I think what's happening here is because of the lack of armor piercing damage, they don't do their damage terribly quickly as other units tend to do, and they don't have the defenses to stay in combat, prolonged combat, and do very well. So I think they really need to be charged around to actually make the most of them and help them survive, or have them fight alongside some infantry to take the damage off them, as opposed to just leaving them in prolonged combat by themselves as we've done here. I did do one more test against infantry just to make sure that I didn't need to write CA a strongly worded letter. Luckily, I can confirm they can actually beat peasant mobs, so it's not that bad, I guess. I decided to try them out in a little bit of a different vein against some monstrous infantry, against flying rat ogres, apparently. How are they going so far? Have they got some serious mass? None of the Blood Beasts went flying anywhere. Either way, they hit the rat ogres very hard, did a lot of damage on that charge, and I'm starting to think, hey, maybe they're more of a monstrous infantry killer, even though they don't have a bonus versus large. That would be kind of weird, but they put these rat ogres away pretty damn quickly. The rat ogres are at the lower end of the monstrous infantry spectrum, but still a fairly impressive performance to take them out so quickly. I also tried them out against the other new monstrous infantry, the Yeti. The Tumbling Yeti. That one nearly went back to the mountains, but overall, these two are very similarly matched, similar price. They seem to be putting out a similar amount of damage so far as well. The Yetis do have the armor piercing, though, so that's a slight advantage. Not a ton of armor for either of these units, though. I also decided to throw the Regiment of Renowned Amblepeak Greybacks into this one as well to see if they would fare much better than the normal variety of Yeti. And honestly, this was a pretty even fight across the board for both sides. A couple of the Yetis won, a couple of the Blood Beasts won, the Regiment of Renown won, of course. So Blood Beasts seeming not so great against infantry, but kind of okay against monsters, maybe for some reason. I then gave the Yetis another test in a stronger monstrous infantry, the Minotaurs of the Beastmen, just the normal ones. Obviously, the anti-large ones would probably put them in the bin, but these two are kind of similar. Minotaurs a little bit more expensive, but not too far off. And for most of the fight, it seemed pretty even all the way through. The Amblepeak Greybacks were able to pretty comfortably beat their Minotaurs, still with half their health left. And the Yetis and Minotaurs, it was pretty even again, much like the Blood Beasts fight. They won some, lost some on both sides. So a pretty even matchup between these two. Yetis seeming pretty strong though. I did do the Empire Swordsman test with them as well, just to make sure I wasn't going insane and that I was somehow wrong about the Blood Beasts. And yeah, they performed as a monstrous infantry should against the Empire Swordsman. They killed them quickly and had most of their health left. Now how about we move on to some big boys, the Colossal Squig to start with. I decided to test these against some infantry as they are an anti-infantry monster, some long beards here. Let's see how quickly they can kill this unit and how much health they have left at the end of it. So they engaged in the fight at 1 minute 40. We'll see how long it takes them to rout these Longbeards. Hopefully they can rout them, otherwise that would be embarrassing. I do think a Colossal Squig probably wants to cycle charge a little bit because it does have a big charge bonus and it is very quick at 90 speed. So it may benefit from charging around a bit rather than staying in the same spot. But at around 4 minutes 40, they managed to rout most of their Longbeards. So that's approximately 3 minutes it took them to get through them, and they've got about half of their health left. I then tested them against a similarly priced unit that I thought would perform similarly as well. In this case, I went for a Feral Mammoth. It took them about 4 minutes and 30 seconds to get through the Longbeards. That's a minute and a half longer than the Squigs. And most of them were just below half health. So the Colossal Squig performing better than this Feral Mammoth. What about against the Toad Dragon? This is a more expensive, higher tier, big chunky monster boy. Well, they engaged about 140 and had them done by about 440. So again, 3 minutes, the same as the Squigs, but they were in much better condition, only losing about a quarter of their health. And I figured why not test a new Slaughter Brute in this same fashion, seeing how quickly he could bonk a bunch of Longbeards on the head. He's got more weapon strength than the Colossal Squig at 550, armor piercing of course. Doesn't have a bonus versus infantry though, like the Squig does, which does help him quite a bit. But the Slaughter Brute animations, they're kind of wide and sweeping, which kind of suggests anti-infantry sort of attacks to me. But by the end of this, the Slaughter Brute got the Longbeards done in about 4 minutes 30, so a fair bit longer than the old Colossal Squig. But they do have a bit more health left, so a little bit tougher. How about we pit these two against each other then? It seems like the Colossal Squig is really good against infantry, but how's he going to do against the larger stuff? The Squig coming in, oh, bites him right on the nose. How's he going to respond? Oh, a nice right hook. More action than Paul versus Tyson this. This one on the end. Oh, same attack, bite on the nose. How's he going to respond? Right hook. Oh, a right slap. What is this, power slap? I also included 2 units of the Regiment of Renowned Colossal Squig, the Acid Burper, just to see if he would fare any better than the normal version. But it's looking like all the Squigs are catching a beat down in this one, and they are going to lose to the Slaughter Brute. But they've done a respectable job getting their health right down on the Slaughter Brutes, so the Squig better against the infantry, get it after the infantry, not so much the monsters, whereas the Slaughter Brute can probably do a bit of both fairly well. But let's put that to the test against the toughest monster in the game, the Terracotta Sentinel. That's right, for some reason, it does actually seem to be able to beat up all the other monsters one-on-one. Most of them anyway, and it's really cheap at only 1,600 compared to the 2,100 of the Slaughter Brute. So let's see who's going to come out on top here. Pretty even to start with, no real damage on either side. Neither of these are anti-infantry or anti-large, so they don't really have a defined role. They can be a little bit versatile. But as this one wears on, the Slaughter Brute goes down. Number 1 goes down. Terracotta Sentinel still got a bit of health left. These other ones just about to go out as well, so the Slaughter Brute not really excelling in any area. It's not particularly good at taking out monsters. It's not particularly good at taking out infantry, but it does both of those well enough. It's an all-rounder. How about some Thundertusk now, capable of firing snowballs as little artillery pieces that'll explode on impact, cracking your enemies right in their terracotta balls. Oh, chilly. Now that's going to be a good AoE anti-infantry attack, but there's also a second missile attack. You see the javelin coming in there. The rider will throw javelins, so it actually has 2 ranged attacks. One of them you can't control, the javelin attack, but some nice versatility there. We're going to charge it in to the Terracotta Sentinels though, see if he can take down the unbeatable Sentinel. The Thundertusk does come across as more of an anti-infantry unit, namely because it has an anti-infantry bonus, but also because of that anti-infantry AoE snowball attack. But as you can see, it is actually starting to beat some of these Terracotta Sentinels, and it is going to beat them all, which is actually really quite surprising. I didn't think it would do so well. I guess maybe that extra missile attack is adding up. Now, if this mythical creature could beat the Terracotta Sentinel, I wonder what else it can do. So I have it take on a Feral Dreadsaurian, which is the cheapest one of the bunch, but if it can beat that, you'll colour me amazed, and well, this thing should be listed as anti-large, not just anti-infantry. Long story short though, it couldn't quite get it done. It did some good damage to the Feral Dreadsaurian, getting it below half health, maybe a little more on some others, but not able to top that monster a little too much. Still very strong though in both areas. Lastly, I decided to test some lords and heroes, so here's Skulltaker, supposedly good at taking on other characters and taking their skulls, so here he is against the best, who is also very good at taking people's skulls. Tried to pop all of their abilities as optimally as possible, which mostly just meant using them as soon as possible. They're both beefed up in the damage output and decreased in the defenses, lower melee defense on both of them while their abilities are active. And Grimgor is edging the fight so far, but as this battle wears on, things get a little bit closer. I popped Grimgor's Bloodforged armor because I forgot to do it at the start, don't know why. Did it now anyway, doesn't really make too much difference, especially as Skulltaker is going to start to disintegrate and is going to lose this fight to Grimgor, so strike one up for the big lad. Skulltaker though, very strong, but this is just on foot, so I decided to try him on his mount as well. So he's on his Juggernaut. He does get a bit of a stat boost in various places on this too, and with the help of his Juggernaut, he is actually going to be able to beat Grimgor this time, so Skulltaker strongest on his mount. I tested him out against Luen as well, who's not a terribly damage dealer lord, but he is very tanky, so I wondered if he'd be able to outlast Skulltaker in some way, but no. He just gets absolutely run through by Skulltaker, and we're about to see him take a Frenchman's head just like in the trailer. Ah, censored. I also tried him out against Tyrion, who is another one of the good duelist lords. Skulltaker seemed to take a lead early and was getting the advantage, but as the fight wore on, it started to go the other way. You can see Tyrion just below a quarter of his health. Scarbrand, no. Skulltaker just on his last bit of health, and then Tyrion gets that big health boost from one of his abilities, and that pretty much seals the deal. Not able to beat Tyrion. Skulltaker, though, definitely hanging with the big boys and going to be a very dangerous lord for enemy lords and heroes. One last test with him though. How about a test against Golfag, who is going to shoot him in the face right at the start. That's going to do a nice bit of damage. He does have a lot of health, so it doesn't look like much, but it did do about 1,000 health off. I also used Golfag's heal ability, which does have to be used when there's no enemies around him, so I had to use it a bit before the fight. So it was a little bit wasted because he was already at full health, but I don't think it would have saved him anyway because he got pretty badly dumped on by Skulltaker. So he doesn't seem to be quite up to the challenge of taking on other lords and heroes, although do remember Skulltaker is very good in this arena, so not really Golfag's fight perhaps. And I thought it's probably not going to be the Eshin Man-Eater's fight either, but hell, I'll give it a try. Let's see what he can do to Skulltaker. I used his smoke bomb and made it like he was getting the jump on Skulltaker, so he didn't charge him back to give him that little advantage, just to see if that would help him survive. He's got that debuff to the armor and the melee defense as well. But while the Eshin boy is looking like he's trying very hard, he's not really getting anywhere on Skulltaker's health and is losing his pretty quickly. And yeah, the Eshin Man-Eater, not up to the standards of Skulltaker, not a duelist by any means, not at least of top tier head takers like Skulltaker, Grimgor, Queek. So I tried him out with a bit of an easier target, a small French woman. I wondered if maybe he was good at like sneaking around the map and sneaking up on these light kind of characters and taking them out quick, so we'll see how quickly he can take out a prophetess. He's got her debuffed, he got her on the charge, didn't do much damage, and now he's been stunned once, and he's been stunned twice, and he's not really getting anywhere fast. Eventually though, he does manage to beat her without losing really any health, but it's definitely not as quick as I was expecting him to be. I guess maybe I was expecting him to be like Snitch or something, which is probably unrealistic. Then I thought maybe he just sucks against characters, so let's try him out in some crowds. So I put him in 3 different fights, one with Bloodletters, a lightly armored unit, one in Chaos Warriors, a more heavily armored but low damage output unit, and another one in some Chosen, so high damage output, high defenses, very tough. I wasn't sure what to expect with any of these fights. I thought he'd do well against the Bloodletters because they don't have much armor on, although he does have armor piercing anyway, but he doesn't have much armor on himself. Against the Chaos Warriors, this was fine because they don't have great damage output anyway. The Chosen are messing him up quite badly, as one would expect, but he is putting a fair bit of damage on them, got them down to half health, so not a terrible performance against them. Against the Bloodletters, he's getting there slowly but surely, and he's actually beaten the Chaos Warriors with still a fair bit of health left, so he can go off and take somebody else on. Against the Bloodletters, though, he is going to eventually beat them, but at the expense of most of his health. So overall, not a bad performance against Infantry at all. Perhaps preferably wants to go for lower tier Infantry or mid-tier Infantry, and could maybe go for assassination attempts on those squishy wizards, but maybe stay away from Skulltaker types. And our final test of the day, Bragg the Gutsman, an anti-large hero. Let's test him out against a Shaggoth, one of the best anti-large units out there. I actually forgot that the Shaggoth is anti-large, so that's going to help him against Bragg. Normally, you'd probably want to target non-anti-large enemies with Bragg. So far, though, he's doing okay. He's taken more health than he's lost. Looking like it's going to be a pretty close one, though. At least until Bragg starts falling over all the time. This is the 4th time he's fallen over right here. He just falls on his face for a while and can't do anything, and that's just giving a free advantage to the Shaggoth. And he is going to end up losing this one just about, but I'm going to blame the falling over, to be honest. I think it's high time they got rid of that. It can really make some footlords and heroes and stuff suck. But anyway, despite losing, Bragg does seem pretty strong here at taking on a Shaggoth, and he has the best getaway routing run in the game. And there we go. Let me know what you reckon of the new units. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Do consider checking out the channel memberships or the Patreon if you'd like to support this channel. Otherwise, I will see you in the future.